Hello, Career Explorers. It is your Professor Erin Charlins. Nice to see you all. Welcome to the MBTI. So for this presentation, you're actually going to need a paper and a pen or pencil. So if you don't have one, go ahead and pause and go grab your pen or pencil and then come right back to us and hit play. Let's get started. What is the MBTI anyway? So I have to say the MBTI is actually one of my favorite things to teach. And the reason is because when I took the MBTI, I found the results to be pretty true to who I was. So at this point, each of you has taken the MBTI assessment, and this presentation is here to provide you with a little bit more information about what the MBTI is, how to interpret it, and then of course you'll get your official MBTI results pretty close following this presentation. So the MBTI looks at normal behavior, and that's important. It's not looking at comparing you to any devious personality types. It identifies your preferences rather than your competencies, skills, or abilities. Keep in mind that no personality type is better or worse than another. Each of them truly has its own gifts. And we use the MBTI for team building, career guidance, leadership, management, and of course, for this class, we're going to be using it for the purpose of helping you find your career direction. I'd like to invite you to go to the web address that's listed at the bottom of your page, www.myersbriggs.org. I'd like to invite you to go there for more information about the MBTI, how the MBTI got started, and so forth. All right, so go ahead and take out your sheet of paper and your pen or pencil, and I'd like you to put the pen or pencil in your dominant hand and simply go ahead and sign your name. So I'm going to do it now. And here's what you have. Here's my name. Pretty simple, right? So if I were to ask you how that was for you, you would probably say it was easy, it was normal, it was effortless, right? That's probably the case. So now what I want you to do is I actually want you to take your non-dominant hand and I want you to sign your name again. So I'm going to do it with you. All right. Here's my signature with my non-dominant hand. So what was that like for me? I had to think about it a lot. It was cumbersome. It was difficult. I didn't like it. I didn't like signing my name with my non-dominant hand. So the reason I have you do this signature exercise is it's quite similar to your personality type. We have a natural preference, just like you have a natural preference for signing your name or writing with a certain hand. You have natural preferences in terms of your personality type. And really, that's all the Myers-Briggs is looking at. With my non-dominant hand, I was able to sign my name. It just took more effort and it took more thought. And it's very similar again with your personality type. You'll use, while you may have natural preferences, you'll use each of the different types at different points in your life. It's just one will come a little bit more easy to you. And again, as we've been learning in this class, our goal is to try to find a career that encompasses our values, our skills, our abilities, our personality type, and see if we can put these things together in a way that makes sense so that you can make an informed career decision. So there's 4 different scales of the MBTI. The first one is how we channel our energy. So the options are E or I. The second dichotomy is how we take in information. Your options are S or N. The third area is how we make decisions, and your options are T or F. And the fourth area is basically our lifestyle or how we orient ourselves to the outside world. And your options are J or P. So what I'm going to ask you to do as we go through this presentation and as we go through each of the dichotomies, I'm going to ask you to choose which letter sounds the most like you. That's it. Don't give too much thought into it, but I want you to really think, which of these sounds more like me based on what I'm describing? And at the end of it, you're going to line your 4 letters up and you're going to have an MBTI type that will be able to compare to your actual official results that you get soon. All right, so again, we're going to start talking about the E and the I. And again, we're talking about where you focus your energy and where you focus your attention. So be thinking about those 2 things. So people with a preference for E tend to focus their energy and attention outwardly. They're interested in the world of people and things. They receive their energy from interacting with people and from taking action. The flip side of that, somebody with a preference for I, they tend to focus their energy and attention inwardly. They're interested in their own world of thoughts and ideas. They're constantly reflecting, and they receive energy from within themselves. Let's talk about somebody with a preference for E a little bit more. They tend to be aware of who and what's around them. Again, they're energized by interacting with people. They enjoy meeting and talking with new people. They're very friendly. They tend to be verbally skilled, often easy to get to know. They tend to speak out easily and often at meetings and in classroom settings. If you ask somebody with a preference for E about a really great party, they're probably going to tell you, it was fantastic because I got to talk to all different kinds of people. There were many, many people there. So that's their idea of a great party. Somebody with a preference for I, again, they tend to be energized from taking time out and also time to reflect on their own thoughts and ideas. Sometimes it's an effort for them to meet new people. Sometimes they hold back at meetings and often have trouble getting involved. Sometimes they're quiet, reserved, and can be a little bit more difficult to get to know. A perfect party for somebody with a preference for I is maybe they just talked to one or two people all night, but those conversations were very deep and meaningful. So the party was fantastic for them. Somebody with a preference for E, sometimes they're bored and restless if they're alone too long. They often think as they speak. You'll notice them in class and they've shot their hand up to answer the question, and they're literally, you can kind of see their thoughts kind of coming out of their mouth at the same time while they're talking. They tend to be very good communicators verbally. They can talk about themselves very rapidly. They have a broad range of interests. Um, they take initiative quite easily in different settings. Somebody with a preference for I, they can get very drained and tired with people, particularly with people that they don't know. They have to have time to gather their thoughts before they speak. They prefer to communicate in writing. They often work out their ideas by reflecting on them. Sometimes they're difficult to get to know. They take initiative in different situations or in issues that are very, very important to them. So sometimes your eyes will look like E's when it's an issue that is touching a value or touching a heartstring for them. They tend to be very, very communicative and very, very talkative. Again, if it's something that's really relevant and important to them. Sometimes they seem withdrawn and secretive to people who don't share their type. So you'll notice as I'm going through these, I may not touch on every single line. I realize that you can read them there, but I'll touch on most of them. So again, some keywords associated with E and I. Action are the E's, expressive, interactive. They often have multiple relationships. They're doers. They do, then they think about things, and then they tend to do again. Somebody with a preference for I, they tend to be involved in reflection, a little bit more quiet, not shy. Again, just a little bit more quiet. They tend to be very concentrated. They tend to have deep friendships, maybe fewer friendships, but they're deeper friendships. They're thinkers. So think about a business setting or a classroom setting, and you have a mixture of E's and I's. Your E's are often the ones who are quick to put their hands up, again, generally speaking, right? Sometimes if an I is really connected to that particular topic or they're passionate about it, they may be quite involved in that conversation. But in the setting, you've got your E's that are kind of shooting their hands up. If a decision needs to be made, sometimes people with a preference for I, again, they're in their thoughts a little bit more, so they may need a little bit more time to process. They definitely have something to say. They definitely have things to share. They're deep thinkers, but again, they're often in their thoughts, and then they're ready to communicate verbally. So you kind of have to balance those kinds of things in your business settings and also your classroom settings. All right, so given the choices and the brief descriptions that you've heard, what is your preference? Is your preference more leaning toward E or is it leaning toward I? And you may wish to draw a continuum as I have on this PowerPoint presentation. to indicate how clear your preference is. Are you all the way over on the E? Are you more in the middle? Are you all the way over on the I? Are you closer to the middle of the I? You decide. Okay. So now let's talk about the S and the N. And remember, this is referring to how you take in information. And keep in mind, often how you take in information might be how you choose to give information. Just something to think about. So people with a preference for S, they tend to take information in using their five senses. So sight, sound, feeling, smell, and taste. They're details people. They can see the trees, but not the forest. So they see all the details. They don't always see big picture right away. Again, they're focusing on the details, but eventually they'll get to the big picture. People with a preference for N, they go beyond what's real and concrete, and they focus on meanings and associations, relationships. They're creating patterns in their minds. They're big picture kind of people. They can often see the forest, but not the trees. Okay, so they're focused on big picture. When you're speaking with somebody who has a preference for N, oftentimes they kind of get to the big picture right away. They see it. They don't often see the details in terms of how to get there right away. Again, they'll get to the details, but they see big picture first. Let's talk a little bit more about somebody who prefers S. They tend to be oriented to present, what's happening right here, right now. In fact, if I were to ask somebody with an S to step outside of a busy classroom and to describe that classroom, they're probably going to be pretty detailed because they're focused on present reality and they like to use their senses. What's happening right here, right now? They're very practical and realistic. They tend to start at the beginning and take things a step at a time. They tend to be pretty linear. They're very specific and literal when they're thinking, writing, and listening. Live in the present. They trust their experiences. Again, they're focused on what's happening right here and right now. Somebody with a preference for N, they tend to be oriented to future possibilities. They're imaginative, inventive, again, creative thinkers. They can start anywhere and leap right over the basic steps and get right to the big picture. They speak and write in general and sometimes abstract terms. They focus on the future, imagining what could be. They trust their inspiration. Again, they're creative thinkers. They're always thinking about, what could be and big picture kinds of stuff. Keywords associated with S and N. Again, your S's are focused on facts, realities, present, what's happening right here, right now. Your people with a preference for N are focused on ideas, future, theoretical, what could be. Kind of a funny story. Imagine, somebody with a preference for N coming home and telling his or her spouse that, hey, honey, we have a date tonight. And somebody with a preference for S says, oh, how did that happen? And then the person with a preference for N says, well, my mom said she's going to watch the kids for us. And the person with the preference for S says, well, tell me how that happened. And the person with the preference for N says, I asked my mom if she could watch the kids for us, and she said yes. The person with the preference for S says, well, how did she seem? Did she sound nice when she responded? The person for N says, with the preference for N says, yes, I asked her if she would watch the kids and she sounded fine. You see where I'm going with that. Somebody with a preference for N, again, they get right to it. They're big picture kind of people. They're not necessarily going to focus on the details. Somebody with a preference for S, they want to know everything. Tell me everything in a linear fashion. It makes sense for them, right? If it happens in a linear fashion, the story makes a little bit more sense for them. All right, so given the choices that you've heard, what do you prefer, S or N? And how clear are you about your preferences? So again, if it's helpful, go ahead and draw the continuum between S and N. So we're going to stop here, and I'll join you for part 2 in just a moment.